An acronym is an abbreviation formed from the initial components in a phrase or a word. Usually these components are individual letters, as in NATO or laser, or parts of words or names, as in Benelux. There are broad currents of consensus, but no universal standardization of various names for such abbreviations, and of their orthographic styling. In English and most other languages, such abbreviations historically had limited use, but they became much more common in the 20th century. Acronyms are a type of word formation process, and they are viewed as a subtype of blending. Nomenclature. Whereas an abbreviation may be any type of shortened form, such as words with a middle omitted, for example, versus for versus or dr for doctor, an acronym is a word formed from the first letter, or first few letters of each word, in a phrase, such as sonar, created from sound navigation, and ranging. Attestations for acronym in German are known from 1921, and for acronym in English from 1940. Although the word acronym is widely used to refer to any abbreviation formed from initial letters, some dictionaries and usage commentators define acronym to mean a word, usually pronounced as such in contradistinction to an initialism or alphabetism, the word or abbreviation formed from a string of initials, whereas some others include additional senses equating acronym with initialism. The distinction, when made, hinges on whether the abbreviation is pronounced as a word or as a string of individual letters. Examples in reference works that make the distinction include NATO/NE to /SCUBA/SKUB/ and radar/REDR/for acronyms, and FBI/FBI/CRT/CRT/ and HTML/ETTML/ for initialisms. The rest of this article uses acronym for both types of abbreviation. There is no agreement on what to call abbreviations whose pronunciation involves the combination of letter names and words, such as JPEG/DEB/ and MS-DOS/MSDS/. There is also some disagreement as to what to call abbreviations that some speakers pronounce as letters and others pronounce as a word. For example, the terms URL and IR can be pronounced as individual letters /JURL/ and /ARE/ respectively, or as a single word /RL/ and /AR/ respectively. When formed from initial letters, the abbreviation qualifies as an initialism regardless of pronunciation. Historical and current use. Acronymy, like retronomy, is a linguistic process that has existed throughout history, but for which there was little to no naming, conscious attention, or systematic analysis until relatively recent times. Like retronomy, it became much more common in the 20th century than it had formerly been. Ancient examples of acronymy, regardless of whether there was meta-language at the time to describe it, include the following. Acronyms were used in Rome before the Christian era. For example, the official name for the Roman Empire and the Republic before it was abbreviated as SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus. Inscriptions dating from antiquity, both on stone and on coins, use a lot of abbreviations and acronyms to save room and work. For example, Roman first names, of which there was only a small set, were almost always abbreviated. Common terms were abbreviated too, such as writing just F for filius, meaning son of, a very common part of memorial inscriptions mentioning people. Grammatical markers were abbreviated or left out entirely if they could be inferred from the rest of the text. So-called nomina sacra were used in many Greek biblical manuscripts. The common words God, Jesus Christ, and some others would be abbreviated by their first and last letters, marked with an overline. This was just one of many kinds of conventional scribal abbreviation, used to reduce the time-consuming workload of the scribe and save on valuable writing materials. The same convention is still commonly used in the inscriptions on religious icons and the stamps used to mark the Eucharistic bread in Eastern churches. The early Christians in Rome, most of whom were Greek rather than Latin speakers, used the image of a fish as a symbol for Jesus in part because of an acronym fish in Greek is ichthyes, which was said to stand for Jesus Christos Deu Huios Soter, Jesus Christ, God's Son, Savior. This interpretation dates from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and is preserved in the catacombs of Rome. And for centuries, the Church has used the inscription INRI over the crucifix, which stands for the Latinese Nazarenus Rex Iudiorum, Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. The Hebrew language has a long history of formation of acronyms pronounced as words, stretching back many centuries. The Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, is known as Tanakh, an acronym composed from the Hebrew initial letters of its 3 major sections: Torah, 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, prophets, and Tuvim, writings. Many rabbinical figures from the Middle Ages onward are referred to in rabbinical literature by their pronounced acronyms, such as Rambam and Rashi, from the initial letters of their full Hebrew names, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, and Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. During the mid to late 19th century, an acronym disseminating trend spread through the American and European business communities, abbreviating corporation names in places where space was limited for writing, such as on the sides of railroad cars, e.g., Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad RF&P, on the sides of barrels and crates, and on ticker tape, and in the small print newspaper stock listings that got their data from it, e.g., American Telephone and Telegraph Company AT&T. Some well-known commercial examples dating from the 1890s through 1920s include Nabisco, National Biscuit Company, Esso, from Standard Oil, and Sunoco, Sun Oil Company. Another driver for the adoption of acronyms was modern warfare, with its many highly technical terms. While there is no recorded use of military acronyms in documents dating from the American Civil War, acronyms such as A&V for Army of Northern Virginia postdate the war itself. They had become somewhat common in World War I, and were very much a part even of the vernacular language of the soldiers during World War II, who themselves were referred to as GIs. The widespread, frequent use of acronyms across the whole range of registers is a relatively new linguistic phenomenon in most languages, becoming increasingly evident since the mid-20th century. As literacy rates rose, and as advances in science and technology brought with them a constant stream of new, and sometimes more complex, terms and concepts, the practice of abbreviating terms became increasingly convenient. The Oxford English Dictionary, OED, records the first printed use of the word initialism as occurring in 1899, but it did not come into general use until 1965, well after acronym had become common. By 1943, the term acronym had been used in English to recognize abbreviations and contractions of phrases that were pronounced as words. It was formed from the Greek words akros, topmost, extreme, and onoma, name. For example, the Army offensive being absent without official leave was abbreviated to AWOL in reports, but when pronounced as a word, AWOL, it became an acronym. While initial letters are commonly used to form an acronym, the original definition was a word made from the initial letters or syllables of other words, for example UNIVAC from Universal Automatic Computer. In English, acronyms pronounced as words may be a 20th century phenomenon. Linguist David Wilton in Word Myths, Debunking Linguistic Urban Legends claims that forming words from acronyms is a distinctly 20th and now 21st century phenomenon. There is only one known pre-20th century English word with an acronymic origin, and it was in vogue for only a short time, in 1886. The word is Colandaries or Colanda, an acronym for the Colonial and Indian Exposition held in London in that year. However, although acronymic words seem not to have been employed in general vocabulary before the 20th century, as Wilton points out, the concept of their formation is treated as effortlessly understood, and evidently not novel. In a post story of the 1830s, Helter wrote a Blackwood article which includes the contrived acronym PRETTYBLUEBATCH. Early examples in English. The use of Latin and Neo-Latin terms in vernaculars has been pan-European and predates modern English. Some examples of acronyms in this class are AM, from Latin ante-maritime, before noon, and PM, from Latin post-maritime, afternoon. 80, from Latin Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, whose complement in English, BC before Christ is English-sourced. OK, a term of disputed origin, dating back at least to the early 19th century, now used around the world. Current use. Acronyms are used most often to abbreviate names of organizations and long, or frequently referenced terms. The armed forces and government agencies frequently employ acronyms. Some well-known examples from the United States are among the alphabet agencies, also jokingly referred to as alphabet soup, created by Franklin D. Roosevelt, also of course known as FDR, under the New Deal. Business and industry also are prolific coiners of acronyms. The rapid advance of science and technology in recent centuries seems to be an underlying force driving their usage, as new inventions and concepts with multi-word names create a demand for shorter, more manageable names. One representative example, from the U.S. Navy, is COMCRUDESPAC, which stands for Commander, Cruisers Destroyers Pacific. It's also seen as COMCRUDESPAC. YABA compatible, where YABA stands for yet another bloody acronym, is used to mean that a term's acronym can be pronounced, but is not an offensive word, e.g., when choosing a new name, be sure it is YABA compatible. The use of acronyms has been further popularized with the emergence of short message systems, SMS. To fit messages into the 160-character limit of SMS, acronyms such as GF girlfriend, LOL laughing out loud, and DL download, or downlow, have been popularized into the mainstream. Although prescriptivist disdain for such neologism is fashionable, and can be useful when the goal is protecting message receivers from crypticness, it is scientifically groundless when couched as preserving the purity or legitimacy of language. This neologism is merely the latest instance of a perennial linguistic principle, the same one that in the 19th century prompted the aforementioned abbreviation of corporation names in places where space for writing was limited, e.g., ticker tape, newspaper column inches. Aids to learning the expansion without leaving a document. The expansion is typically given at the first occurrence of the acronym within a given text, for the benefit of those readers who do not know what it stands for. The capitalization of the original term is independent of it being acronymized, being lowercase, for a common noun such as frequently asked questions, FAQ, but uppercase, for a proper noun such as the United Nations, and, as explained at casing of expansions. In addition to expansion at first use, some publications also have a key listing all acronyms used therein, and what their expansions are. This is a convenience to readers for two reasons. The first is that if they are not reading the entire publication sequentially, which is a common mode of reading, then they may encounter an acronym without having seen its expansion. Having a key at the start or end of the publication obviates skimming over the text searching for an earlier use to find the expansion. This is especially important in the print medium, where no search utility is available. The second reason for the key feature is its pedagogical value in educational works such as textbooks. It gives students a way to review the meanings of the acronyms introduced in a chapter after they have done the line-by-line reading, and also a way to quiz themselves on the meanings by covering up the expansion column and recalling the expansions from memory, then checking their answers by uncovering. In addition, this feature enables readers possessing knowledge of the abbreviations not to have to encounter expansions redundant to such readers. Expansion at first use and the abbreviation key feature are aids to the reader that originated in the print era, and they are equally useful in print and online. In addition, the online medium offers yet more aids, such as tooltips, hyperlinks, and rapid search via search engine technology. Jargon. Acronyms often occur in jargon. An acronym may have different meanings in different areas of industry, writing, and scholarship. The general reason for this is convenience and succinctness for specialists, although it has led some to obfuscate the meaning, either intentionally to deter those without such domain-specific knowledge, or unintentionally by creating an acronym that already existed. The medical literature has been struggling to control the proliferation of acronyms as their use has evolved from aiding communication to hindering it. This has become such a problem that it is even evaluated at the level of medical academies such as the American Academy of Dermatology. As mnemonics. Acronyms are often taught as mnemonic devices. For example, in physics, the colors of the visible spectrum are RGBIV, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. They are also used as mental checklists. For example, in aviation, GUMPS, which is gas undercarriage mixture propeller seat belts. Other examples of mnemonic acronyms include CAN-SLIM and PAVPANIC. Acronyms as legendary etymology. It is not uncommon for acronyms to be cited in a kind of false etymology, called a folk etymology, for a word. Such etymologies persist in popular culture, but have no factual basis in historical linguistics, and are examples of language-related urban legends. For example, cop is commonly cited as being derived, it is presumed, from constable on patrol, and posh from port out, starboard home. With some of these specious expansions, the belief that the etymology is acronymic has clearly been tongue-in-cheek among many citers, as with gentlemen only, ladies forbidden for golf, although many other, more credulous, people have uncritically taken it for fact. Taboo words in particular commonly have such false etymologies: shit from ship/store high in transit, or special high-intensity training. And fuck from for unlawful carnal knowledge or fornication under consent/command of the king. Orthographic styling. Punctuation. Showing the ellipsis of letters. In English, abbreviations have traditionally been written with a full stop/period/point in place of the deleted part to show the ellipsis of letters, although the colon and apostrophe have also had this role. In the case of most acronyms, each letter is an abbreviation of a separate word and, in theory, should get its own termination mark. Such punctuation is diminishing with the belief that the presence of all capital letters is sufficient to indicate that the word is an abbreviation. Ellipsis is understood style. Some influential style guides, such as that of the BBC, no longer require punctuation to show ellipsis, some even proscribe it. Larry Trask, American author of The Penguin Guide to Punctuation, states categorically that, in British English, this tiresome and unnecessary practice is now obsolete. Though some other sources are not so absolute in their pronouncements. Pronunciation-dependent style. Nevertheless, some influential style guides, many of them American, still require periods in certain instances. For example, the New York Times Guide recommends following each segment with a period when the letters are pronounced individually, as in KGB, but not when pronounced as a word, as in NATO. The logic of this style is that the pronunciation is reflected graphically by the punctuation scheme. Other conventions. When a multiple-letter abbreviation is formed from a single word, periods are in general not used, although they may be common in informal usage. TV, for example, may stand for a single word, television, or transvestite, for instance, and is in general spelled without punctuation, except in the plural. Although PS stands for the single word postscript, or the Latin postscriptum, it is often spelled with periods, PS. The / aka virgule, is sometimes used to separate the letters in a two-letter acronym, as in /a, not applicable, not available, C/o, care of, and without. Inconveniently long words used frequently in related contexts can be represented according to their letter count. For example, I-18 abbreviates internationalization, a computer science term, for adapting software for worldwide use. The 18 represents the 18 letters that come between the first and the last in internationalization. Localization can be abbreviated L10N, multilingualization M17N, and accessibility M11Y. In addition to the use of a specific number replacing that amount of letters, the more general X can be used to replace an unspecified number of letters, e.g., CRXN for crystallization, representing plurals and possessives. There is a question about how to pluralize acronyms. Often a writer will add an S following an apostrophe, as in PCs. However, Kate Turabian, writing about style in academic writings, allows for an apostrophe to form plural acronyms only when an abbreviation contains internal periods, or both capital and lowercase letters. Turabian would therefore prefer DVDs and URLs and PhDs, while the Modern Language Association explicitly says, do not use an apostrophe to form the plural of an abbreviation. Also, the American Psychological Association specifically says, without an apostrophe. Multiple options arise when acronyms are spelled with periods and are pluralized, for example, whether compact discs may become CDs, CDs, or CDs. Possessive plurals that also include apostrophes for mere pluralization and periods appear especially complex, for example, the CDs labels the labels of the compact discs. This is yet another reason to use apostrophes only for possessives, and not for plurals. In some instances, however, an apostrophe may increase clarity, for example, if the final letter of an abbreviation is S, as in sauces, although abbreviations ending with S can also take ES, e.g. sauces, or when pluralizing an abbreviation that has periods. However, the style guide for the New York Times states that the addition of an apostrophe is necessary when pluralizing all abbreviations, preferring PCs, TVs and VCRs. A particularly rich source of options arises when the plural of an acronym would normally be indicated in a word other than the final word, if spelled out in full. A classic example is Member of Parliament, which in plural is Members of Parliament. It is possible then to abbreviate this as MP, or similar, as used by former Australian Prime Minister Ben Chifley. This usage is less common than forms with S at the end, such as MPs, and may appear dated or pedantic. In common usage, therefore, weapons of mass destruction becomes WMDs, prisoners of war becomes POWs, and runs batted in becomes RBIs generally if the abbreviation ends with a tense back vowel syllable. The plural of RBI is RBIs because acronyms become bona fide words as language evolves, and, as with other words, attract a plural suffix at the end to be made plural, even if the first word is the main noun, in the spelled out form. The argument that acronyms should have no different plural form, for example, if D can stand for disc, it can also stand for discs, is in general disregarded because of the practicality in distinguishing singulars and plurals. This is not the case, however, when the abbreviation is understood to describe the plural noun already. For example, US is short for United States, but not United State. In this case, the options for making a possessive form of an abbreviation that is already in its plural form without a final S may seem awkward, for example, US, US's, etc. In such instances, possessive abbreviations are often foregone in favor of simple attributive usage, for example, the US economy, or expanding the abbreviation to its full form, and then making the possessive, for example, the United States economy. On the other hand, in speech, the pronunciation United States is sometimes used. Abbreviations that come from single, rather than multiple, words such as TV, television, are usually pluralized without apostrophes. To TVs, most writers feel that the apostrophe should be reserved for the possessive, the TV's antenna. In some languages, the convention of doubling the letters in the acronym is used to indicate plural words, for example, the Spanish CE. UU, for Estados Unidos, United States. This old convention is still followed for a limited number of English abbreviations, such as SS. For saints, PP for the Latin plural of pages, paginae, or MSS for manuscripts. Case. All caps style. The most common capitalization scheme seen with acronyms is all uppercase, all caps, except for those few that have linguistically taken on an identity as regular words, with the acronymous etymology of the words fading into the background of common knowledge, such as has occurred with the words scuba, laser, and radar. These are known as anacronyms. Small caps variant. Small caps are sometimes used to make the run of capital letters seem less jarring to the reader. For example, the style of some American publications, including the Atlantic Monthly and USA Today, is to use small caps for acronyms longer than 3 letters, thus US and FD are in normal caps, but NATO in small caps. The acronyms AD and BC are often small capped as well, as in, from 4004 BC to AD 525. Mixed case variant. Words derived from an acronym by affixing are typically expressed in mixed case, so the root acronym is clear. For example, pre-WWII politics or post-NATO world. In some cases a derived acronym may also be expressed in mixed case. For example, messenger RNA and transfer RNA become mRNA and tRNA. Pronunciation-dependent style. At the copy editing end of the publishing industry, where the aforementioned distinction between acronyms, pronounced as a word, and initialisms, pronounced as a series of letters, is usually maintained, some publishers choose to use caps/lowercase c/lc styling for acronyms, reserving all caps styling for initialisms. Thus NATO and AIDS c/lc, but USA and FBI caps. For example, this is the style used in The Guardian, and BBC News typically edits to the style, though its official style guide, dating from 2003, still recommends all caps. The logic of this style is that the pronunciation is reflected graphically by the capitalization scheme. Some style manuals also base the letters case on their number. The New York Times, for example, keeps NATO in all capitals, while several guides in the British press may render it NATO, but uses lowercase in UNICEF, from United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, because it is more than 4 letters, and to style it in caps might look ungainly, flirting with the appearance of shouting capitals. Numerals and constituent words. While abbreviations typically exclude the initials of short function words, such as and, or of, or to, this is not always the case. Sometimes they are included to make a pronounceable acronym, such as COLR, Congress of Racial Equality. Sometimes the letters representing these words are written in lowercase, such as in the cases of TfL, Transport for London, and LOTR, Lord of the Rings. This usually occurs when the acronym represents a multi-word proper noun. Numbers, both cardinal and ordinal, in names are often represented by digits rather than initial letters, as in 4GL, fourth generation language, or G77, group of 77. Large numbers may use metric prefixes, as with Y2K for year 2000, sometimes written Y2K, because the she symbol for 1000 is K not K, which stands for Kelvin. Exceptions using initials for numbers include TLE, 3-letter acronym / abbreviation, and GOF, gang of 4. Abbreviations using numbers for other purposes include repetitions, such as W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, and T3, trends, tips, and tools for everyday living. Pronunciation, such as B2B, business to business, and numeronyms, such as I-18 and internationalization. 18 represents the 18 letters between the initial I and the final N. Casing of expansions. Although many users of natural language, when engaging in expository writing, show a predisposition to capitalizing the initials of the expansion for pedagogical emphasis, trying to thrust the reader's attention toward where the letters are coming from, this has no basis in standard English orthography, which reserves capitals for maintaining the common versus proper distinction. Enforcing the latter, most professional editors case-fold such expansions to their standard orthography when editing manuscripts for publication. The justification is that, 1. Readers are smart enough to figure out where the letters came from, even without their being capitalized for emphasis, and that, 2. Common nouns do not take capital initials in standard English orthography. By the same expectation, point 1. Bold or italic font for the letters is considered equally unnecessary. For example, The Onset of Congestive Heart Failure, CHF, unpublished manuscript, and The Onset of Congestive Heart Failure, CHF, unpublished manuscript, become The Onset of Congestive Heart Failure, CHF, published medical article. Not all publishers copy-edit content before publishing it, however, so unedited styling is seen frequently. Changes to or wordplay on the expanded meaning. Pseudo acronyms. In some cases, an acronym has been redefined as a non-acronymous name, creating a pseudo-acronym. The term orphan initialism has also been used for names that began as an acronym but lost this status. Such an apparent acronym, or other abbreviation, that does not stand for anything cannot be expanded to some meaning. For example, the letters of the SAT, pronounced as letters, U.S. College Entrance Test, no longer officially stand for anything. This is common with companies that want to retain brand recognition while moving away from an outdated image. American Telephone and Telegraph became AT&T, Kentucky Fried Chicken became KFC. Today emphasize the role of frying in the preparation of its signature dishes, and British Petroleum became BP. Pseudo-acronyms may have advantages in international markets. For example, some national affiliates of international business machines are legally incorporated as IBM, or, for example, IBM Canada, to avoid translating the full name into local languages. Likewise, UBS is the name of the merged Union Bank of Switzerland and Swiss Bank Corporation, and HSBC has replaced the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. Redundant acronyms and RAS syndrome. RAS syndrome. Rebranding can lead to redundant acronym syndrome, as when Trustee Savings Bank became TSB Bank, or when Railway Express Agency became RIA Express. A few high-tech companies have taken the redundant acronym to the extreme, for example, ISM Information Systems Management Corp. and SHL System House Ltd. An example in entertainment is the television shows CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, and Navy, NCIS. Navy was dropped in the second season, where the redundancy was likely designed to educate new viewers as to what the initials stood for. The same reasoning was in evidence when the Royal Bank of Canada's Canadian operations rebranded to RBC Royal Bank, or when Bank of Montreal rebranded their retail banking subsidiary BMO Bank of Montreal. Another common example is RAM memory, which is redundant because RAM, random access memory, includes the initial of the word memory. PIN stands for Personal Identification Number, obviating the second word in PIN number. In this case, its retention may be motivated to avoid ambiguity with the homophonous word PIN. Other examples include ATM machine, automated teller machine, EAB Bank, European American Bank, Cable Ace Award for Cable Excellence Award, DC Comics, Detective Comics, HIV virus, human immunodeficiency virus, Microsoft Senti technology, new technology, and the formerly redundant SAT test, Scholastic Achievement/Aptitude/Assessment test, now simply SAT Reasoning Test. TNN, the Nashville/National Network, also renamed itself the new TNN for a brief interlude. The UK defence contractor BAE Systems was formed when British Aerospace, BAE, merged with Marconi Electronic Systems, MES. According to the company's branding policy, the BAE part of the name is said to not stand for anything, and the company insists that we are always BAE Systems, never BAE or BAEs. Simple redefining. Sometimes, the initials continue to stand for an expanded meaning, but the original meaning is simply replaced. Some examples. DVD was originally an acronym of the unofficial term digital video disc, but is now stated by the DVD Forum as standing for Digital Versatile Disc. GAO changed the full form of its name from General Accounting Office to Government Accountability Office. RAID used to mean redundant array of inexpensive discs, but is now commonly interpreted as redundant array of independent discs. WWF originally stood for World Wildlife Fund, but now stands for Worldwide Fund for Nature, although the former name is still used in Canada and the US. The UICC, whose initials came from the Romance language versions of its name, such as French Union Internationale contre le Cancer, International Union Against Cancer, changed the English expansion of its name to Union for International Cancer Control, from International Union Against Cancer, so that the English expansion, to would correspond to the UICC initials. Acronyms. A backronym, or backronym, is a phrase that is constructed after the fact from a previously existing word. For example, the novelist and critic Anthony Burgess once proposed that the word book ought to stand for Box of Organized Knowledge. A classic real-world example of this is the name of the predecessor to the Apple Macintosh, the Apple Lisa, which was said to refer to local integrated software architecture, but Steve Jobs' daughter, born 1978, was named Lisa. Another real-world example is the supposed meaning of the Gantt chart, developed by and named for Henry Gantt as the graphical and narrative timetable. Contrived acronyms. Acronyms are sometimes contrived, that is, deliberately designed to be especially apt for the thing being named, by having a dual meaning, or by borrowing the positive connotations of an existing word. Some examples of contrived acronyms are USA Patriot, CAN-SPAM, CAPTCHA, and ACT UP. The clothing company French Connection began referring to itself as FCUK, standing for French Connection United Kingdom. The company then created T-shirts and several advertising campaigns that exploit the acronym similarity to the taboo word fuck. The U.S. Department of Defense's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, is known for developing contrived acronyms to name projects, including Resurrect, Nirvana, and Dude. In July 2010, Wired magazine reported that DARPA announced programs to transform biology from a descriptive to a predictive field of science named Batman and Robin for biochronicity and temporal mechanisms arising in nature and robustness of biologically inspired networks, a reference to the Batman and Robin comic book superheroes. Some acronyms are chosen deliberately to avoid a name considered undesirable. For example, Verliebten Berlin, VIP, a German telenovela, was first intended to be All's New Rossliebe, All for Love, but was changed to avoid the resultant acronym anal. Likewise, the computer literacy and internet technology qualification is known as CLIT, rather than CLIT. In Canada, the Canadian Conservative Reform Alliance Party was quickly renamed to the Canadian Reform Conservative Alliance when its opponents pointed out that its initials spelled CCRAP, pronounced C-crap. The satirical magazine Frank had proposed alternatives to CCRAP, namely SSHIT and NSDAP. Two Irish institutes of technology, Galway and Tralee, chose different acronyms from other institutes when they were upgraded from regional technical colleges. Tralee RTC became the Institute of Technology Tralee, ITT, as opposed to Tralee Institute of Technology, TIT. Galway RTC became Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, GMIT, as opposed to Galway Institute of Technology, GIT. Team in training is known as TNT, and not TIT. Technological Institute of Textile and Sciences is still known as TITS. Contrived acronyms differ from acronyms in that they were originally conceived with the artificial expanded meaning, whereas acronyms are later invented expansions. Macronyms/nested acronyms. A macronym, or nested acronym, is an acronym in which one or more letters stand for acronyms themselves. The word macronym is a portmanteau of macro and acronym. Some examples of macronyms are: XHR stands for XML HTTP request, in which XML is extensible markup language and HTTP stands for hypertext transfer protocol. POWER stands for Performance Optimization with Enhanced RISC, in which RISC stands for Reduced Instruction Set Computing. VHDL stands for VHSIC Hardware Description Language, in which VHSIC stands for Very High Speed Integrated Circuit. XSD stands for XML Schema Definition, in which XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. SEC stands for Semi-Equipment Communication Standard, in which SEMI stands for Semiconductor Equipment Manufacturing Industries. AIM stands for AOL Instant Messenger, in which AOL stands for America Online. Some acronyms can be multiply nested. The second-order acronym points to another one further down a hierarchy. In an informal competition run by the magazine New Scientist, a fully documented specimen was discovered that may be the most deeply nested of all. RARS is the Regional ATOVS Retransmission Service. ATOVS is Advanced TOVS. TOVS is Tyros Operational Vertical Sounder, and Tyros Television Infrared Observational Satellite. Recursive acronyms. A special type of macronym, the recursive acronym, has letters whose expansion refers back to the macronym itself. One of the earliest examples appears in the Hacker's Dictionary as MUNG, which stands for MUNG until no good. Some examples of recursive acronyms are: NU stands for News Not Unix. LAME stands for Lamentan MP3 Encoder. PHP stands for PHP, Hypertext Preprocessor. WINE stands for Wine is not an emulator. HERD stands for Herd of Unix replacing daemons, where herd itself stands for herd of interfaces representing depth. A mutually recursive acronym. Acronym can itself be used as a macronym. Acronyms can really obfuscate names you make. Non-English languages. Specific languages. Chinese. In English language discussions of languages with syllabic or logographic writing systems, such as Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, acronyms describe the short forms that take selected characters from a multi-character word. For example, in Chinese, university/literally great school is usually abbreviated simply as Great One, used with the name of the institute. So Peking University is commonly shortened to Lit. North Great by taking the first character of Peking, the northern capital Beijing. In some cases, however, other characters than the first can be selected. For example, the local short form of Hong Kong University uses Kong rather than Hong. There are also cases where some longer phrases are abbreviated drastically, especially in Chinese politics, where proper nouns were initially translated from Soviet-Leninist terms. For instance, the full name of China's highest ruling council, the Politburo Standing Committee, PSC, is Standing Committee of the Central Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China. The term then reduced the Communist Party of China part of its name through acronyms, then the Standing Committee part, again through acronyms, to create. Alternatively, it omitted the Communist Party part altogether, creating Politburo Standing Committee, and eventually just Standing Committee. The PSC's members' full designations are Member of the Standing Committee of the Central Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China. This was eventually drastically reduced to simply Chang Wai, with the term Ru Chang, used increasingly for officials destined for a future seat on the PSC. In another example, the word National People's Congress can be broken into four parts: equals the whole nation, people equals representatives equals conference. Yet, in its short form literally man/people big, only the first characters from the second and the fourth parts are selected. The first part and the third part are simply ignored. In describing such abbreviations, the term initialism is inapplicable. Original research. Many proper nouns become shorter and shorter over time. For example, the CCTV New Year's Gala, whose full name is literally read as China's Central Television Spring Festival Joint Celebration Evening Gala, was first shortened to Spring Festival Joint Celebration Evening Gala, but eventually referred to as simply Chunwan. Along the same vein, Zhongyuazan Yang Dianchi Tai was reduced to Yangshi in the mid-2000s. Korean. Many aspects of academics in Korea follow similar acronym patterns as Chinese, owing to the language's commonalities, like using the word for big day to refer to universities, dahak, big school. They can be interpreted similar to American university appellations, such as UPenn or Texas Tech. Some acronyms are shortened forms of the school's name, like how Hongik University, Hongik Daehak, is shortened to Hongdae. Big Hong or Hongyu. Other acronyms can refer to the university's main subject, e.g. Korea National University of Education, Honguk Geeaondae Hakgyo, is shortened to Gyodae, Big Ed, or Ed. U. Other schools use a Koreanized version of their English acronym. The Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, Hangukwaakjisawan, is referred to as KAIST, Kaisoitoi, in both English and Korean. The three most prestigious schools in Korea are known as Kai, Sukai, combining the first letter of their English names, Seoul National, Korea, and Onsei Universities. In addition, the college scholastic ability test, Daehaksuhakneungrai is shortened to Sunung. SA. German. To a greater degree than English does, German tends toward acronyms that use initial syllables rather than initial single letters, although it uses many of the latter type as well. Some examples of the syllabic type are Gestapo rather than GSP, for Geheimstaatspolizei, Secret State Police, FLAK rather than FAK, for Fliegerabwehrkanone, Anti-Aircraft Gun, CRIPO rather than KP, for Kriminalpolizei, Detective Division Police. The extension of such contraction to a pervasive or whimsical degree has been mockingly labeled AQFI, for Abkürzungsfimmel, strange habit of abbreviating. Examples of AQFI include Vakuhila, for Volrenkürz, Hintenlang, short in the front, long in the back, i.e., omelette, and the mocking of Adolf Hitler's title as Grofaz, Grote Feldherr aller Zeiten, greatest general of all times. Hebrew. It is common to take more than just one initial letter from each of the words composing the acronym. Regardless of this, the abbreviation sign Shem is always written between the second last and last letters of the non-inflected form of the acronym, even if by this it separates letters of the same original word. Examples: for the United States, for the Soviet Union, for Rishon LeZion, for the school. An example that takes only the initial letters from its component words is Sahal, for Israel Defense Forces. In inflected forms, the abbreviation sign Shem remains between the second last and last letters of the non-inflected form of the acronym, e.g. report singular, plural, squad commander masculine, feminine. Indonesian. There is also a widespread use of acronyms in Indonesia, in every aspect of social life. For example, the Golkar political party stands for Partai Golongan Karya, Monas stands for Monument National Monument, the Angkot public transport stands for Angkot Kota City Public Transportation, Warnet stands for Warung Internet Cafe, and many others. Some acronyms are considered formal or officially adopted, while many more are considered informal, slang or colloquial. The capital's metropolitan area, Jakarta, and its surrounding satellite regions, Jabodetabek, is another infamous acronym. This stands for Jakarta Bogor Depok dan Jrang Bekasi. Many highways are also named by the acronym method, e.g. Jalan Tol, Toll Road, Jagol Rai, Jakarta Bogor Kiai, and Perbalunai, Purwakarta Bandung Silunai, Yogyakarta, Jogja Solo Semarang. In some languages, especially those that use certain alphabets, many acronyms come from the military. The Indonesian military, TNI Tentara Nasional Indonesia, and Indonesian police, POL or Kepolisian Republik Indonesia, are infamous for heavy acronyms use. Examples include the Kopassus, Komando Pasukan Khusus, Special Forces Command, Kopaska, Komando Pasukan Katak, Frogman Command, Kodam, Commando District Military District Command. One of the Indonesian Army's administrative divisions, Serka, Sersan Kepala, Head Sergeant, Akmil, Academy Military Academy in Magelang, and many other terms regarding ranks, units, divisions, procedures, etc. Heavy acronym use by Indonesians makes it difficult for foreigners and learners of Bahasa Indonesia to seek information and news in Indonesian media. Japanese. The Japanese language makes extensive use of acronyms. This is most prevalent in katakana transcriptions of foreign words. For example, the Poemon Media franchise's name originally stood for Pocket Monsters, which is still the long form of the name in Japanese, and WPURO stands for Word Processor. However, the practice is also common with native kanji and hiragana words. Russian. Acronyms that use parts of words, not necessarily syllables, are commonplace in Russian as well, e.g. Gazprom, for Gazovaya Pромышленность, gas industry. There are also initialisms such as SMI, for Sredstva Massovo Informaции, means of mass informing, i.e. mass media. Another Russian acronym, Gulag, combines two initials and three letters of the final word. It stands for Glavno Upravlenie Lageri, Chief Administration of Camps. Swahili. In Swahili, acronyms are common for naming organizations such as TUKI, which stands for Taasisi ya Uchunguzi wa Kiswahili, the Institute for Swahili Research. Multiple initial letters, often the initial syllable of words, are often drawn together, as seen more in some languages than others. General grammatical considerations. Declension. In languages where nouns are declined, various methods are used. An example is Finnish, where colon is used to separate inflection from the letters. An acronym is pronounced as a word, NATO, 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 and into NATO. An acronym is pronounced as letters, EU, 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 hun, into EU. An acronym is interpreted as words, EU, European Union, EU, in European Union, and into EU. The process above is similar to how, in English, hyphens are used for clarity when prefixes are added to acronyms, thus pre-NATO policy, rather than pre-NATO. Lenition. In languages such as Scottish Gaelic and Irish, where lenition, initial consonant mutation, is commonplace, acronyms must also be modified in situations where case and context dictate it. In the case of Scottish Gaelic, a lowercase h is added after the initial consonant, for example, BBC Scotland. In the genitive case would be written as BHBC Alba, with the acronym pronounced VBC. Likewise, the Gaelic acronym for television GD, Televizine, is TBH, pronounced TV, as in English. Extremes. The longest acronym, according to the 1965 edition of Acronyms, Initialisms, and Abbreviations Dictionary, is ADCOMSUBORDCOMPHIBSPAC, a United States Navy term that stands for Administrative Command, Amphibious Forces, Pacific Fleet Subordinate Command. Another term COM and AVSEACOMBATSYSE and GSTA, which stands for Commander, Naval Sea Systems Combat Engineering Station, is longer, but the word combat is not shortened. The world's longest acronym, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, is NIOMTPLABOPARMBETZBOMONIMONKONOTDTEKHSTROMONT. The 56-letter acronym, 54, in Cyrillic, is from the Concise Dictionary of Soviet Terminology, and means the laboratory for shuttering, reinforcement, concrete, and ferroconcrete operations for composite monolithic and monolithic constructions of the Department of the Technology of Building Assembly Operations of the Scientific Research Institute of the Organization for Building Mechanization and Technical Aid of the Academy of Building and Architecture of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The card game Magic: The Gathering has a playing card called Our Market Research shows that players like really long card names, so we made this card to have the absolute longest card name ever, elemental, with text on it saying, just call it OMRSTPLRLCNSWMTCTHTALCNE for short.